E adesso parliamo di carbonara.
And now we will talk about carbonara. You maybe heard a lot of stories, maybe tasted it a lot of times. Maybe you made it yourself more than once. It's a pasta that has a lot of complexities, even though it may seem easy to make, especially because when you'll start to cook it for other people who will pay for our dish, we can't make mistakes. They say the Americans during Second World War to bring this preparation to this necessity to use the typical ingredients of their breakfast, so eggs and bacon or pancetta. And they say that also there were the Carbonara an Italian historical figure. There are more stories that tell about its authenticity, but to describe it, I want that we together try to have a bit of imagination. I think that carbonara was born in Italy, in the farming areas, where the farmers, especially in spring and summer, would move to the mountains to look for greener areas. And what they brought with them were all the products that they produced themselves and could preserve at certain temperatures. So cured meats, cereal, bread, cheese like pecorino. So I think that the great classics of Roman cuisine in this case, ␜𝐴𝐵 𝐸𝐵, but also carbonara, were born from this type of eating, from this type of diet, farming diet. In a time maybe they exchanged cereals, so they stepped from bread to pasta to generate maybe more portions. This is maybe a fantasy to add a further story that might also not be completely false. What are we using to make carbonara? Even here there is kind of a non-clarity. Someone uses pancetta, someone uses guanciale. I don't want to teach you to make the best carbonara in the world, because this is impossible. Each one of us has their uniqueness, their way to create things. So we'll try to make a carbonara where the various passages that bring us to its making, we'll try to understand them to make it in 2020 maybe more digestible, less fat, but with the same flavor, traditional flavor. We will use some mezze maniche, we can use rigatoni, we can use spaghetti as pasta. So we're bringing water to a boil, just a little bit of salt, because we already have a quite savory structure. We have pecorino cheese, we have Parmesan cheese, there's savoriness about guanciale in this case, so don't exaggerate with the salt. Just we will cook our pasta. Always remember to stir quickly the pasta, especially in the first moments, because as it will heat up and the cooking phase will start, the starches we start to gelify. So if we don't stir the pasta, every single pasta will tend to stick to each other. So let's cook the pasta. And aside, we're going to take a small pan, flame on, so heat on, moderate heat. Let's put the guanciale. You need a nice aged guanciale. You can see it from how opaque the meat is. It's nice and light, a symptom of a quite aged guanciale. The color of the fat is a candid white. It has an intense flavor, spiced and aromatic smell. We don't need oil, we have all of the fat directly from the guanciale. Remember, moderate heat, because if we use it too high of a heat, we can sear and caramelize quickly the external part of the guanciale, and it will stay maybe too soft in the inside. We will crunch it nicely stir it constantly. Then 2/3 of the guanciale we have crunched up. We will remove it and we'll put it on some absorbing paper, and we will use it as a crunchy note to put on the surface of the pasta. So let's maybe do it this way too. The cut of the guanciale, I don't like it too thin nor too thick, so I like it, I want it to have a certain consistency. If you're using a copper pan like this, every now and then just turn off the flame because it takes temperature very quickly, but at the same time we don't want it to force it too much. Pasta, we have it cooking, the guanciale is getting crunchy. And we'll make the version in which we'll finish the cooking, the pasta cooking in the pan with all of its risks, because we saw before in the egg-based preparations we have some indicators that are the 61 degrees for the egg white and 65 for the yolk that we don't have to go over to avoid to cook the eggs. Another difficult thing is to put the eggs in a pan with the pasta, so we'll just have to put it on the flame, remove it from the flame, so keeping an eye on the temperature. If you have another type of pan, maybe in stainless steel or aluminum, you can leave it on low flame without turning it on off every now and then. So 70 grams of guanciale. You don't have to put it all necessarily. A whole egg and 1 egg yolk. Part of the eggs will remain in the pan, so we have to calculate the residues that will remain in the pan. So we're putting some black pepper, freshly ground. Do not exaggerate because there is some pepper in the guanciale, so we can always add it on top, because the majority of people await it on top of the pasta. Then we're going to add some grated Parmesan. I usually put a little bit of Parmesan and a lot more pecorino. In other occasions, especially in the areas of Rome that are characteristic for this type of dish, sometimes they just only use pecorino. And let's stir. We're not putting a lot of cheese. This is because if we overload with cheese, we can still obtain a nice creaminess of the carbonara, but in our mouth it would tend to overpower our palate because we're using way too much fat. So let's whisk nicely. We don't need to whip. You can stir however you want. Just put a little bit more pecorino. And to have the right consistency and creaminess, we will take advantage of the starches released from the pasta, but especially the denaturation of the egg proteins. So let's divide the guanciale nicely. Remember to cut it quite uniformly to have kind of the same consistency of every piece. So stir in the eggs with a whisk. A little bit more pecorino compared to Parmesan. And since we insert grated Parmesan, we still added an ingredient that will allow us to slow down the coagulation of the eggs a little bit. Now we're starting to remove the guanciale that we want to put on the surface of the pasta that gives us some crunch. This is a version of mine. Of course, everyone has its own. I'll let it crunch and remove one part, and I'll leave another part in that will help to work with the pasta. Since when we will add the pasta, part of the guanciale will tend to soften as it's supposed to be, but it's important to give the perception of guanciale even in the mix of the pasta. So let's control the pasta cooking. Still a few minutes left. Let's control the savoriness, and then when the temperature falls down a little bit, we're going to put some water. Always heat off. Warm water. So why did we do this? Because when we will add the pasta inside, and then we'll put the eggs and give structure to the carbonara, if we only have the fat part, the fat part will be able to get to temperatures that the water can't reach. So if I strain the pasta with the egg mixture directly, only with the fat in the pan, the fat could increase the temperature a lot and fry the eggs. Furthermore, since we are emulsifying like this, and we talked about emulsions, we are lightening the intensity of the flavor of the fat, and we have a lot of it in this dish, so will allow us to soften the fat flavor. And then the percentage of water we added will help us to coat and thicken the sauce and the pasta, and it will also finish the cooking of the pasta in the pan, allowing it to release part of the starches that we want to have for the creaminess. Another important thing, when you will make a preparation like this, the client will expect a preparation that's different from the one they make at home. If you notice that your carbonara is optimal with 90 grams of pasta, 60 grams of guanciale, 1 egg and 1 egg yolk, 20 grams of parm, 40 grams of pecorino, you will have to be good to always use the same portions, never change them. Even for the pasta cooking, it's important to learn the time, even using a timer or a clock. This is because in this phase I can give 100% of my attention to this preparation, but in the moment in which I have to make more dishes together, clearly my attention will be divided for the quantity of dishes I'm making, and it is impossible during a service, quite intense service, where we're making 10-12 dishes together, to take out the water, the pasta at the same time every time. So to give the possibility to the client to always eat the same thing, if they order it, we gotta be good to take the time and put in always the same quantity and not changing what's the balance, the total balance of our pasta. Okay, let's strain the pasta. Adding into our pan, and clearly as we're putting it on flame, low heat, we start to saute a little bit. Clearly the important thing is, today we use cooking water because we only made this little pasta. You will work with the pasta cooker, you will work with a lot of pasta types cooking simultaneously, and the water of the pasta might overload with starches, so it would be not very pleasant. So try to emulsify the fat of carbonara in aglio olio or other sauces with some clean virgin water that's warm, without salt, that allows you to bathe it without overloading it. Adding some warm water. So we removed pasta from the water nice and al dente, so undercooked. When we will insert the eggs, we will do it off the flame, and in the base we have to have some dampness, some humidity. See that it's getting shiny slowly, thanks to the stimulation of the starches that are still present. From here, increasing the temperature a little bit, always maintain your working station clean. From here we are moving it off the flame and quickly re-stirring the eggs, putting them inside. You can also do it directly in a bowl, and we will do this softly out of the flame, so mixing. Now on flame, low flame. You can help yourself with a spatula, and you're going to do this sauteing, lifting and sauteing, letting it take some temperature, stirring constantly, flame and stopping. Doing this, especially with copper, as we said, doing this to bring the eggs to the right stage of protein denaturation. This will allow us to make it creamier and a lot more digestible. So always use the help of your hand and a spatula, because clearly as you go on with the cooking, the eggs will tend to thicken, take structure, and it will be more difficult to saute like this. You can see it's nice and creamy. Now we are letting the temperature decrease a little bit, a few seconds. What happens now is that the starches and the fats in the eggs and the cheese will thicken up, improving the density of the pasta. We can plate up. Trying to put the pasta in this way to take some sauce that we can use after. So let's put the pasta in the center. Always try to use deep bottom dishes because they give me the idea of the first dish, and that it's much easier to plate up compared to a flat dish. Often tends to let the pasta lose the shape. Then let's take some sauce. It's creamy. Always clean the dish. Then some pepper, do not exaggerate. Our crunchy guanciale it can also give some volume to the presentation. And then if you want to add some pecorino on top, it's not wrong. Yes, a majority of people will ask for it, and this is the result that we obtain making our carbonara.